what is certain is who you are and the fact that you're valuable and the fact that you are allowed to claim the life that you want to have.
I am so excited. I have been looking forward to this interview for quite a bit. Welcome to Things Go Sideways. This is a space for honest conversations about those moments in your life when your title, when your plan, when your identity stops holding and you have to decide who you are without it. It's not talking about best practices. We're not talking about bounce back stories, although those are there too. This is all a part of that piece that happens in the middle when the structure collapses and clarity hasn't arrived yet. Today, I'm joined by Phil Putnam. Phil spent more than 2 decades in executive roles at major tech companies before being laid off in October 2023. And that was a moment that shook both his personal and professional identity and ultimately led to keynote speaking and thought leadership work that was focused on trust, change, and growth. Wow. Phil, thank you for being here and for being willing to talk with us about the part before it all made sense.
Absolutely. Welcome to my heart. Come on in.
Well, I mean, and with such a gracious welcoming, then, when we'll just jump into it if that's okay. Um, when you look back at that layoff, which is very hard, a lot of people going through stuff like this, a lot of people, especially in this past year, um, what actually made it a sideways moment for you?
Well, it's fundamentally destabilizing when you have job loss, because first of all, it strikes at your survival instincts.
Yeah,
How am I going to
yeah.
pay my bills? How am I going to care for my loved ones? So there's that layer. But then also, there's two other things that come to mind. The second is every major source of messaging about identity, especially in America, but many other countries as well, encourage us, tell us, command us to make our work a centerpiece of our identity and our utility a centerpiece of our sense of self-worth. And so when we go through job loss, it really strikes at the core of who we are. And because we are primed for that, we are living a lifetime of that messaging. It is impossible to not internalize that. And the third thing that was so challenging about it was, to me, layoffs felt so common.
Mm. Hmm.
And so I was sitting here literally in this chair that I'm sitting in right now, thinking, why am I struggling with this so much? Judging myself for this. So many people are going through this. It's something that impacts millions of people. It's been a part of my life as long as I've been alive. I'm currently 46 years old. Like, layoffs are not a new concept. I've lost jobs before. Actually, I've lost two jobs previously for performance purposes. Believe it or not, those were far easier to deal with
Wow.
than getting laid off because of a cost-cutting measure.
Hmm.
But I think that there was this real dissonance between the depth of my feelings and the depth of the impact and the vulnerability it made me feel, and how commonplace the event felt to me. And so it took a long time, several months, for me to finally get to a place where I was able to accept that my feelings were valid about it. My feelings were real, and that even though it's common, it does not mean that it's simple.
Along with our society that is often telling us that our identity is so inextricably linked to what it is that we do as a profession. And so to have something come along to shake that up, of course, that's like an identity challenge at that point. But another shakeup, I think, is this idea of how quickly we're supposed to rebound. I mean, I feel like it's almost expected that, and there's a level of grief, isn't there? And something like a layoff. So talk to me a little bit about that shakiness that happens when you go through an experience like that you're not expecting.
Yeah, I mean, there is a real grief involved. I miss my former boss. Like
Mm.
I'll be openly emotional throughout this conversation. I don't care.
Yeah.
I cherish that man. He was so good to me, and I miss him. I miss working with him every day. I miss being esteemed by him. I have such respect for him, and the fact that he had similar respect for me
Hmm.
was so affirming to me. I miss that. I miss many of my colleagues. Um, I miss so much of it. There's also a lot of it that I don't miss, and a lot of conflict that comes with those feelings as well. Um, but there is a lot of grief that goes through it. The other thing you talked about was the expectation of rebounding. I think the expectations are even more savage than that.
Really?
I don't think we're even expected to have a time of rebound. I think that we are expected just to absorb it and completely keep on moving.
Wow.
And I think that that is actually a central tenet of what makes work today so difficult and so emotionally and personally challenging and demanding is that uh, I don't think it's unfair to say that in today's world in 2026, the world is harder,
Hmm.
it's bigger, it's less curious. There's less room for nuance than there used to be. And so I think that we are just expected to absorb whatever is handed to us when it comes to our employment and move on.
Mm.
That has nothing to do with the way that humans operate,
Yeah.
but that is what's expected of us. And I think that is what is so challenging. And then when you take the fact that your survival instincts are inflamed, and
Yeah.
like I have to go regain access to income if that's what you need, right? So, especially if you have to immediately go find another job, you also know that you're expected to show up optimistic and like you're not rattled at all. Um, and for me, my best analogy for what it was like to go through the first 6 months following my layoff was like after you break up with somebody in a long-term romantic relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
2 months later, you're out with your friends and you announce, I'm ready. I'm ready to. It's going to be fantastic. I'm emotionally available, but you are a train wreck
Yeah.
and you have no perspective. So that's what it was like for me to go through this process, and especially in those first 6 months. No perspective, all drive. The round of layoffs that I was laid off in, I also helped architect.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So
So
that's
yeah.
like that's like you knew the nitty-gritty of the planning for it and underneath stuff, and then you're swept up in it yourself.
And
Ew.
embarrassed. Yeah. So I had been a part of that process for several months. I knew it was coming
Mm-hmm.
because it was part of my job to architect that round of layoffs. It was only about a week prior that it started to become clear to me that I was going to be included in it. This is a side note, but in fact, the day that I fully realized it was happening, I was at a conference speaking. And that day just happened to be sort of my breakout moment as a full-time professional keynote speaker. It was the same day that I called my boss and said, "Hey, am I being laid off next week?" So it was these two things totally colliding. But all this to say that I had some awareness. So the weekend before it happened, I told my husband, "Hey, just so you know, I'm probably going to get laid off this coming week. I'm going to spend the weekend preparing for it." So the day comes, I get laid off on a Monday, and he says, "Hey, what do you want to do?" Not in a challenging way or demanding way, just like, "Do you know what you want to do? I want to be supportive." And I said, "Well, give me a week. I just need to let the dust settle, and then I'll kind of figure it out." And so again, a week later, I'm literally sitting right in this chair, if you're watching the video, and he's standing in the kitchen, which is right where I'm. And he says, "Do you have an idea of what you want to do?" And I said, "I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm going to say, but I think I want to start my own business."
Gosh.
And the reason why it was so odd to me that that's what I wanted was at the time I was mouthy, but I don't think I was bold.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't experience myself as a particularly courageous person. And my idea of what entrepreneurship was not in line with who I felt I was at that moment. But what was really making me not want to go back to working for someone else was I just could not tolerate the idea of putting my fate back in someone else's hands.
Yeah.
It was when I say intolerable, I mean it. It's like it made my skin crawl. It was just like unfathomable that I would choose that level of vulnerability again because I was so vulnerable in that moment. And only after those first 6 months, when I finally got some perspective, did I start to understand the depth at which this layoff impacted me.
Can we talk about that for a moment? Because one of the questions that I had was about trust. And I feel like this is a great segue into that question because when that layoff happened, where did trust fracture? How, trust in companies, trust in leadership, trust in yourself?
Sure.
Like, talk to me about it.
Sure. I'll say a couple things. The first thing is that it took me easily a year and a half or almost 20 months to fully understand the difference between we don't want you and we can't use you anymore. Or more to the point, you're not valuable and you don't align with our current needs anymore. And in my situation, the layoff was because I didn't align with their current needs anymore. I was a vice president of sales enablement, and I'm more of a generalist at that. I am exceptional at behavioral change and sales skill building and revenue and customer relationship skill building. But the market had become so industry specific by that point that they really needed somebody who knew that market, and I did not.
Hmm.
I met the requirements of what they needed when I was hired, and then those things evolved. And it took almost 2 full years for me to appreciate the difference between the layoff saying, you're not good, you're not valuable, versus you no longer meet our needs. And so I do have a more generous view of what the layoff decision was motivated by. And the thing that really shook my confidence and broke trust so much is because I'd spent time as an executive on that level of making those decisions, I'd seen how those decisions were made. And this is not true in all cases, but it really forced me to recognize the fact that not every leadership decision is good or right. And not every leader is actually equipped to make good business decisions. And I'm not saying that was the case with the people who made decisions about me. To be frank, I would have let me go too. And I even said that pretty shortly after this layoff. I was like, no, I can understand why it didn't work. They were going in a different direction. It still felt deeply personal at that time, but I could at least like get a little bit of my head around the business reason for
You're
it.
so much more advanced than I am. I got to tell you, in my own experience, I'm still like, whoo, you made a big mistake.
I hear you.
Just
It's
a
much,
little, just
yeah,
a little honesty here. Let me just throw in my own story. But
sure.
yeah, no, sorry. I like you're so I feel like maybe your therapy is just like really working better than mine.
Well, no, I'll open the door a little bit wider here because I think it gives context for something that's worth talking about a little bit later in the conversation. But one of the reasons why I might come off so altruistic
Mhm.
or understanding is a lot to do with the way that I had to live in my childhood, which, to
Mm,
be honest, was very, very challenging. And so I am very skilled by necessity at just sort of being understanding of the other person's point of view,
mhm.
almost to my own harm. And so that's part of why I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'll absorb it. I'll move on. I was raised to absorb it and move on. That's why it comes naturally to me. That actually is more of a problem, to be honest. And if there's anything that I really spent the last 2.5 years resolving, if the true real purpose, the real story, the real value of what happened in the 2.5 years since the layoff was resolving that.
Mm.
It had it had all the impact was on my professional life, but it really had nothing to do. The origin, the genesis of my emotional operating system, that was the real thing that got worked on in the past 2.5 years.
That's so interesting to me. Like I don't ever want to, I would never wish a sideways moment on anyone because they're hard. They are really, these are the difficult times in our lives that, these are the times that try men's souls. These are the times in our lives that are they are difficult, and they bring up all kinds of wounds from the past, questions about what we're made of and who we are and who we want to be. And I will say a little Pollyanna-ish here. It is my stance that while we're in the muck and the mire of going through these types of, sideways stories, that it's during these times when we can do some excavation and some healing and some cleaning and some understanding of ourselves. We have the chance to make such great next steps as long as we don't move too fast without thinking about it, you know?
Gosh. And that's probably one of the kindest things this process did for me is it was so massive, it was impossible to move too fast. If anything, the most important thing for me was to be slow
Mm,
and
mhm.
honor my needs. And I want to finish answering the trust question before I come back to this. I had to I had to really come face to face with the fact that in some cases, not everybody has equal making ability. Just because they have power doesn't mean they make are equipped to make good, sound business-based decisions. Or even if they are equipped, that they will always do that.
Right.
And I saw firsthand how sometimes job security is directly related to the personal emotional maturity of your most senior leader.
Okay, hold on. I'm processing what you just said.
When you're endowed with power
Hmm.
and you're in a corporate or a professional environment, a business environment, there's not a huge amount of checks and balances. In theory, there are, but that's not always operational. And so sometimes leaders make decisions based on how they feel or who they want to be around or what makes them feel threatened. And oftentimes, the longer you're in power, the more fragile you become because the less challenged you are. I think this really highlights one of the essential dichotomies of employment. Because I think we all know, like when you hear me say that, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But we also know that employment is usually where we get the resources we need to stay safe and to stay happy and to get the life that we want. And it is a very, very scary thing to consciously live in the truth that the source of your survival resources are in the hands of potentially very capricious people.
Yes, absolutely.
So we don't live in it consciously. We just sort of, it's what I refer to as falling asleep in the snow. You know it's dangerous, but you can't resist it, so you kind of just give in to the environment. We operate at a pretty high level of risk
Hmm.
to our personal, emotional, and logistical safety. Every day, every moment, we're vulnerable. But we can't tolerate living in that reality consciously every moment, so we fall asleep in the snow. And I do think that today's employment world requires that of us. Again, I really am not trying to be unfairly harsh and not unfairly harsh to the leaders who laid me off. Again, I agree with their decision. I no longer met the needs of how that company needed to approach the market. but I was still deeply hurt
Hmm.
by it. I can't, looking back now, I can't say that I was deeply hurt by them, but I was deeply hurt by how it just tore away the veil at how vulnerable we actually are when it comes to employment.
So what was revealed when you tore away that veil? I mean, I think
My
that's
God.
I feel like, when the title, the role is ripped away, here you
Sure.
are. What did you find?
Now, 2.5 years later, with perspective, with time and growth, I can say that what the core of what was revealed to me um, is that I had lived the first 46 years of my life with no real sense of agency. I was born and bred to serve someone else's agenda, at, even at harm to myself. And that was my mode of life. Um, and it was only through the journey of personal growth that the layoff initiated that I was able to get to a place where I actually understand that I am allowed to live the way that I want to live.
Ooh, agency.
And
Agency.
I can
Yes.
remember specifically the exact moments, the beginning and the beginning of the journey of realizing that I didn't have agency and the moment that I first realized I was living with it. And yeah, there was a whole lot of pain and patience and it's only been in the last few weeks that I can look back and say that I'm actually glad the layoff happened. I used to struggle to say that because I felt like it was giving approval to something that I feel was avoidable.
Hmm.
But let's just say it cost me a lot of money over the last 2.5 years to be self-employed and to go on this journey, worth every penny. I'd pay it 10 times over for the growth that's happened in the last 2.5 years.
So what have you had to let die?
I do not fear failure. I fear success. I can fail all day and laugh about it and tell you about it and think that it's great and hilarious. I do not struggle to be limited. I struggle with the full nature of my capacity.
Oh, yeah.
And here's a story that really illustrates what needed to die. So I now work as a keynote speaker and author. So essentially a thought leader, a leadership expert. And so organizations pay me for my thoughts. So the story was I realized there was a period of about 6 months in the summer of 2025, like the early spring to early fall, where it
Hmm.
was really about me really exploring and understanding what is this job? Like, what are the job requirements of being a self-employed full-time leadership expert, thought leader, speaker, author? And pretty early on in that process, I realized, oh, what I'm actually asking people to do is pay me hundreds of dollars a minute for my thoughts. I should probably believe that they're worth it.
Hmm.
And so I can't remember exactly what made me choose this particular technique, but I thought, well, I often work from the inside out. I'm going to work from the outside in on this one. And so what I did is I said, for at least an hour a day, I'm going to walk around my apartment saying out loud, I have a world-class mind. I'm going to pace around this apartment for at least an hour a day saying this to me for as many days as it takes until I believe it. And so my dog was there. He's like, "What are you doing, dude? Like you're real active." Um, but that's what I decided to do, and it took 13 days. What had to die was any sense of my limitations, any sense of false humility, any sense of unjustified self-doubt. Because the thing is, I do have a world-class mind.
Hmm.
I was so afraid to fully claim it. I didn't feel like I had the right. I didn't feel like I was allowed to claim it. But I realized I have to come correct because being put on stage and being listened to is such a privilege. It is such a place to me of not only honor, but responsibility. But that's what it is to me. And I have to make sure that if you are giving me the gift of your time and attention, that I'm coming correct,
Hmm.
honoring that fully. And to me, part of that is we need to get beyond any of this crap that says I don't belong here. And if I don't believe that I belong here, I don't have the right to take the money and the time and the stage space from somebody who does.
Along with being able to read an audience differently because you've gone through this disruption in your own life, um, are you able to identify when an organization is maybe dealing with some instability, or it's sort of quietly unraveling beneath the surface when you go in? Because sometimes as a speaker, you might go in and you have just a few conversations with an organization. I mean, are you able to sense that more now, or how has that changed?
Um, so my ability to sense it has not changed. I've always been remarkably good at that. I think my understanding, and this is sounds a little odd, I think, given our conversation so far, but it's the truth. My empathy for the leaders
Hmm.
is a lot stronger. Um, I had a very profound conversation with one of my mentors in October of 25. And one of the key things he said to me was, I really need you to fall back in love with the leaders who you're speaking to, because you're not right now. You're looking at them as the villain in your story. And he said, you're not going to be effective that way. And it's not just for them, it's also for you. And the context of this conversation actually was I had sort of started to get an idea of what the next evolution of my thought leadership work would be. And I actually started writing my second book. And it was basically a message of saying to leaders, it's your job responsibility to resolve your personal emotional challenges and you grow as a person and not try to use your work environment and your team to relive or resolve those personal challenges. Like stop conscripting your professional colleagues and your direct reports into your personal emotional growth. And in that conversation, he thankfully was very, very blunt. And he helped me realize that book I thought I was writing, that wasn't my next book. That was my journal.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like, look, this is you. And I realized in that conversation, I've lived my entire career trying to use my professional environment to resolve my personal issues.
That's the kind of mentor you want, is somebody who's able to tell you the truth and do it with to be direct, but to be caring, and
Yeah.
to do it with care,
Yeah.
And
And
so,
this is a trap that speakers and thought leaders, people who are commissioned to share their opinion and their insights have to be really careful of, is misunderstanding the difference between the message you're here to deliver to others and the healing you're going through yourself.
hmm.
And what he helped me realize is if in the future, when I complete my personal growth on this issue, when I can fully say that I am no longer in a mode of essentially using my colleagues and my peers, my professional relationships to resolve my personal issues, I'm not ready to go on stage and share that with the world. That's not my body of work because what, in my opinion, when you go on stage and try to teach others on something you're still deeply going through yourself, you are trauma dumping. You're taking something from them. You're not giving something to them. The audience knows when you're trying
Hmm.
to take something from them, and that's not what they're there for. They deserve
Yeah.
better than. And so there's the phrase I use for it is actually born of a quote from the movie Mystic Pizza. because my mom watched that movie incessantly, so I grew up on that movie. It's just
Yeah.
one moment where Julia Roberts' character says to her sister, played by Annabeth Gish, "Wipe your conscience," and it's fine, wipe your conscience. But
Yeah.
it always stuck with me, and it sort of became the first evolution of it was, "Don't wipe your conscience on me."
Mm-hmm.
And now in the context of what we're talking about, it's like, "Don't wipe your soul on me."
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
come to me with your soul ready to deliver this message. Don't use me to get to a place where you're personally growing, you're personally grown through this. Like, don't wipe your soul on me. And I think we do a lot of that to each other in
Mm-hmm.
work, not just in speaking work, but in just in work in general. We think that other people are there so we can wipe our souls on them, and we're not doormats. The corporate work was never the context for my best work. And I always felt a little bit like I was like jackknifing myself into every role that I had to some extent. Like I was like 80% qualified for the role as written, but then other skills that are not on the job description that are so deeply valuable, I had in spades, but I never found a context for my full self in my work internally. And I came to realize that as much as I spent over 2 decades working in a corporate environment, it was not the setting for my best work.
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurship is the setting for my best work. And I'm allowed to claim and operate in the setting of my best work. And to really bookend this journey we've been talking about from real devastation and profound vulnerability to 2 weeks ago, I had a moment um, where I realized that I am living exactly the life that I want to live. It was I never ever imagined I'd have a moment like that. It took me by such surprise, especially because it happened in the moment where all profound life realizations happen, the airport in Newark, New Jersey.
Of course.
Of course,
Newark, come on.
the most romantic, profound place in the
I've
world.
been to that airport.
Oh my
Mm.
gosh, I spent a lot of time at that airport because I'm a United guy. It's a big hub, and
Yeah.
I live in New York City, so it's right there. But I was getting off the plane. I was coming home from doing a speaking gig, and I had my headphones in, and I was listening to one of my favorite songs that makes me feel like myself. And I was walking off the jetway into the gate, into the terminal, and just realized this is what I want. This is exactly what I want. It's 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. It's work hours, as I've been told. I'm not in an office. I've just been paid well to do what I'm absolutely best at, to serve in the way that I'm most equipped to serve. And and I got flown there and back, and I got fed, and I got to spend time around incredible people. I got to make people laugh and think and feel. I got to give the absolute best of myself. And I'm in sweatpants now, getting off the airplane, rocking out to this song that makes me feel like my best self. And this is my job. And I also knew I was going to do it all again the next week. And I did.
And you're like, this
And
is
I
it.
just thought, oh my gosh, it's not that I never even thought it was possible. It's that it was even possible for me to think it up until a few months ago. Like, I'm going to say that again because I think that's profound. It just came out of my mouth in the moment. I'm like, wow, I'm a writer. Like, it's not that I never thought it was possible. It's that it just wasn't even possible to think it. And the reason why I repeat that is because if you are listening and you are relating hardcore to this, if you're going through that kind of disenfranchisement and disconnect from yourself and your value, and you're in the depth of it, I cannot promise you what it will be like or when it will happen. I can just tell you that what is unimaginable to you right now is at some point possible. And if you can't see it right now, that's completely okay. Patience is required. Patience is the work. Um, Vulnerability and honesty is the work, and how you will grow personally matters a million times more than where you work, where your job is, what your title is. All that is so vulnerable and so precarious. You have no real control over it. But what is solid, what is certain is who you are, and the fact that you're valuable, and the fact that you are allowed to claim the life that you want to have.
Mic drop. Thank you. This is actually that is a wonderful way to close. And I'm thankful for your friendship. I'm thankful for the raw honesty that you brought to our conversation. Although, admittedly, I have to say, I don't know you to be anything but
I can't.
raw, honest with every conversation we have. But thank you for bringing that to this discussion, and for staying inside that messy middle with us so that we could talk about that part, not just the glossy outcome, but that part where things can feel so dysregulated and uncomfortable. Please, everyone, think about what Phil shared. If something in your career is just cracked, you don't have to turn it into a brand or make a huge career pivot or breakthrough immediately. Sometimes you just have to deal with the truth of what was lost and being able to be honest with yourself first. And so, with that, I would just thank our guest again and thank everyone for listening to this. And we will see you next time.